in our lead this hour from Pro Bouncy Ball. It's not every day that a team that has one of the top records in their sport whacks their coach, but that has happened. The coaching shakeup in the Cream City. You didn't hear about this? Maybe you missed it. Milwaukee said thanks, but no thanks. Adrien Griffin, who was hired for some reason to replace Mike Budenholzer, and Adrien Griffin has been let go after 43 games. It's one of the shortest coaching tenures for a one-year guy in NBA history. The Bucks were 30-13. 30-13. That's the second best record in the NBA. And turn out the lights, the party's over. As Adrian Griffin, we barely knew you. And he's exiting stage left. Now, then came the shocker of shockers. A sports story reported by CNN, which has ruffled the feathers of the insider community. I was talking in the pre-show production meeting about how Woj and Shams are the only ones allowed to break NBA news. No one else is allowed to break NBA news other than Woj and Shams. Well, this came from CNN, and people up in arms over that, but the news came down that the Bucks had agreed to terms with Doc Rivers. Yeah, that guy, to take over as the coach. Now, the story was not totally debunked after that. It was reported, if you're watching the TNT coverage. I don't watch the TNT without Kenny Smith and Barkley. They're just annoying people. Shaq's there, but the other people are annoying. But I'm told that on the TNT broadcast, they were doing some games on Tuesday, that they had the story that Doc Rivers was going to the Bucks. Well, the story was then, it was said, well, they're talking. It's not done yet. You got, like, weird rogue actors like Magic Johnson's involved in this. Now, Doc Rivers has been working as a lousy NBA broadcaster since he got dumped by the 76ers. But it does appear that he is going to be back, although maybe it's not official here in the middle of the night. But Doc Rivers is going to end up back in the NBA with Milwaukee, played college basketball at Marquette. So let us discuss the question. Of course, that was 10,000 years ago he played college basketball. The question, does Doc Rivers to the Bucks make sense? Does it make any sense? So I've got grifter, rugby, and presidential pardon. And we will combine all of these things together, and we're going to go old school. We're going to make the Baba Ganoush is what we're going to make. We're going to make the Baba Ganoush. Now, first of all, if the Bucks actually do this, and there's always the chance they realize, what are we doing here? And they back out of it. But assuming the position that the Bucks are going to go forward with Doc Rivers, this is floating on the lazy river. If you ask us, we got to fire the coach because the players don't like the coach. Well, who are you going to bring in? I would contact Coach Bud and see if he wants to come back. Because Mike Budenholzer, they won a championship. He was there. Not that he was the reason that they won, but I'd rather have him than Doc Rivers. I'd rather go down to the morgue and get somebody and put him out there on the bench than Doc Rivers. Doc Rivers is not the answer. How many times must he go out there and puke all over the court as a coach? How many times? All right. Fear the deer. The Bucks fans should fear the deer. If Milwaukee ownership, are they drinking everything in the mini bar right now? Like, I know, we're going to bring in Doc Rivers as the coach. When people talk about Glenn Rivers, that's his real name. He's not actually a doctor. When they talk about Glenn Rivers as a coach, you always hear what a nice man he is. He's debonair and all that. You never hear, wow, that guy's a good coach. Now, listen, I admit, and I've been very consistent over the years behind these microphones, that in all of our major professional sports in the industrial complex of sports, pro basketball coaching matters the least. It does. It's the players' league and all that. That's why the Bucks fired the coach. But that said, Doc Rivers, there's two words for Doc Rivers. Common denominator. Doc Rivers has been the common denominator with talented teams, with the Lob City Clippers, and the crossover with the beginning of the great Kawhi Leonard era in Clipper basketball. He also stumbled and bumbled with Joel Embiid, who's playing like Wilt Chamberlain in Philadelphia, and he had James Harden and other talented players in Philly. The longer we get away from Doc Rivers coaching the Celtics, the more amazing what that Boston team was able to do to win with kryptonite Doc Rivers on the sideline. But if you look at the doc, this is medical malpractice for Doc Rivers. He is a grifter. The guy's a smooth talker, although not on television. The scribes love him. The basketball media love him because he plays grab ass with them, gives a good quote. Sounds like he knows what he's talking about. He's a charismatic con man is what Doc is in terms of coaching. I played in the NBA fine, but in terms of coaching, the guy's a con man. Now, secondly, who is directly responsible for Adrien Griffin's demise as Milwaukee's coach? So we take a couple steps back. You follow the evidence. You follow the breadcrumbs, and there's a rugby term that applies here. The term coach killer came from rugby, and that would be Giannis Antetokounmpo. There was a report about a month ago that said Giannis Antetokounmpo was at loggerheads with Adrien Griffin, and everyone just dismissed the report and said, oh, that's just bull junk. That's not true. But you also have the double whammy here. It's the freak and Dame time. Dame Lillard, who has, despite the fact the Bucks have been winning, right? They've been winning here, and they've got a good record and all that. They've been winning at a high rate, so that's kind of cool. But still, you watch them, and something's missing. I was watching the Bucks game the other night against the Pistons, and it was nip and tuck against a morbid Pistons team, and it took some late heroics to pull that game out for Milwaukee. That should never be the case. But Dame Lillard is not clicking on all cylinders. Lillard, it's like he's a cheap knockoff version of what he had been on the Oregon Trail. And this is the golden time for the Milwaukee Bucks with Dame Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo. And so even though they were winning a bunch, it's like, well, this is not sustainable in the playoffs. This is not going to work in the playoffs. So Adrian Griffin, we would like you to take a long walk off a short pier. Get the hell out of here. All right, final thought. We're going to pivot away from basketball to baseball. That's right, the rare and appropriate baseball-themed Maller monologue. This portion of it dedicated to hardball, the elitist Baseball Writers Association of America, a fraternal order that bars broadcasters from voting for the Hall of Fame, even though if you've looked at the writing business, there's not a lot left. I think the L.A. Times just went out of business. They just fired a bunch of their beat writers there at the L.A. Times, a once great newspaper, which is now a disaster. But that's the writing business. So the Baseball Writers Association of America, I don't know if you saw this or not, if you heard about it, they have elected the class of 2024. That class includes Adrian Beltre, Joe Mauer, and Todd Helton. They are the newest members of the Baseball Hall of Fame. Now, we're going to leave Mauer out of this for now. We'll get back to him at another point in the show. But what are your first thoughts when you saw Todd Helton and Adrian Beltre making the 2024 Baseball Hall of Fame? Your first thought that popped in your head. My first thought was hypocrisy. And this continues to bother me. Now, for years, we were doing this show during the meat of the steroid era. We were on the air when Bonds was hitting ridiculous amounts of home runs and Sosa and McGuire and all those guys. And through the entire time, my position was, shut her down, right? Shut her down. None of these guys are getting the Hall of Fame. But yet, as the years have gone on and as time has evolved, we see that there is selective enforcement. Certain guys are given a presidential pardon and allowed to enter the Hall of Fame. Now, like it or not, Todd Helton and Adrian Beltre are guys that are tied to the steroid era. I was covering the Dodgers when Beltre broke in. He was a teenager, and I was told how great Adrian Beltre was going to be when he came to the Dodgers. However, he was less than spectacular his first 5 years in the business, like 5 or 6 years. I think his first 6 years he averaged about 16 home runs a season and 65 RBIs, which is not amazing. It's okay. It's not great. It's not generational. It's certainly not Hall of Fame. And then on the cusp of free agency, I remember it's 20 years ago. 2004. Adrian Beltre went out and didn't just have a breakout season. He led Major League Baseball in home runs. He hit 48 home runs and had 121 RBIs in the steroid era. He finished second Second in the MVP race to Barry Bonds. Balco Barry. Hello? Ding, 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 ding. No red flags from the baseball writers. No red flags from the baseball writers. Right? No eyebrows were raised. None of that. Now, Helton's another guy, and people dismiss it because he played at Coors Field and all that, but if you look at the dramatic decrease in productivity, and those have the hallmarks, when you see that, those in the steroid era, that the hallmark was, okay, you're doing whatever you're doing, whatever magic beans you're doing, and then you fought. Now, do I know for sure that Beltre and Helton were doing steroids? I don't. But my point is not even that. I don't even care if they did steroids. My point is, you leave Bonds out, you leave Sosa and Clemens and guys like that because they're dirty, rotten scoundrels, which I get it, but then you're letting these other people in. What are you doing? Like, seriously, are you stupid? Are the baseball writers morons? Maybe they are. Actually, I've met some of them. They are morons. Some of them are nice, though. I get along with a few of them.